Thank you, Lucia. The future is very, very uncertain and very, very difficult to predict. But one thing you can be certain about is that most of the time you try to predict it, you actually get it wrong. And here's some examples of that, some very, very famous example. Here's another one. One thing that's very, very reassuring about this is that if you get it wrong, you're actually in very, very good company, because the two gentlemen that I showed you earlier on are quite distinguished gentlemen and have achieved a lot in their career. Okay. For QT Launchpad, we also have to do our crystal ball glazing, our prediction of the future. And that's actually a really, really important part of the project, because QT Launchpad, as a support action, is tasked to develop a European large-scale action to tackle high-quality machine translation. Okay? So this goes under the banner towards a large-scale European quality translation initiative. And hopefully this has an impact on the CEF, the Connecting Europe facility, but also on the research part of Horizon 2020. So this is one of our core tasks. QT Launchpad is very collaborative based in its research, but also in its engagement of the important stakeholder groups. So the planning for this QT21, that's what we call this big action on high quality translation, involves a lot of stakeholder groups, European Centers of Translation, and Hans had a couple of names on the list earlier on, but also sophisticated and enthusiastic large-scale users of translation technology, including potential users, technophile and quality-conscious translation service providers, providers of language tools and resources, and experienced translation integrators, and finally, and very, very importantly, translation professionals. And in this 10 minutes, I just want to give you sort of like a sneak preview, if you like, of our current thinking on this QT21 project. And then we have about, I think we're going to have about maybe 15 minutes or so time for discussion and engagement from the audience on some of the aspects that we've presented earlier on, the quality metrics, the quality estimation, which can be partly based on the quality metrics, and of course also on QT21. So I'm going to sketch our thinking on this in terms of two dimensions. The first is sort of like the predicting the future bit. That's the MT roadmap 2014 to 2020. And then in terms of a master plan that is embedded in this MT roadmap and also embedded in a lot of previous work that has gone on under MetaNet and the various activities surrounding Meta and the planning activities in there. And for the master plan, I'm going to try and concentrate a lot on the project structure that we have in mind at the moment. Okay, so let's start talking about the roadmap. The roadmap has two important dimensions. The first one is a leitmotif, and the other one is kind of like the sort of like context into which this leitmotif is embedded. And we call these the key performance impact factors. These are the things that we think are really going to have an impact on the development of machine translation over the next 6 or 7 years. So the leitmotif is obvious. It's this QT Launchpad idea of translation quality bands, of translation quality barriers between those bands, and of trying to systematically address those quality bands. So, make the good part of the translation quality band larger, because that's sort of like, for high quality outbound translation, it's really, really important. Because that's kind of like what the human translators will post-edit. They might fix one or two sort of like remaining mistakes, etc. However, that leitmotif is embedded in a general context, and the general context we try to capture in terms of these key performance impact factors, and there are 4 of them. So the first one is, of course, disruptive new approaches in machine translation. And these come potentially in various kinds. So one such disruptive approach might be a completely new way of being able to computationally model the cognitive processes that go on in the head of a professional translator, That's sort of like really very, very, very far out. Another disruptive technology would be very, very substantial improvements to the current components of our machine learning-based translation models, such as really much, much stronger, much better language models, such as perfect reordering models. And there's a lot of work that is going on in that area at the moment in the sort of like technology development community, and you can see these papers at ACL, etc. This might also be related to trying to capture information that's in the long tail, those rare phenomena that you see in language that are very, very difficult to model using standard statistical or machine learning technologies. There's a whole host of things that can really have a really strong impact and engender big jumps in translation quality. Okay? A third dimension, and this is equally important, is innovative applications. Okay? So there might be new uses of machine translation that change the way we live. People mentioned, for example, the Internet of Things earlier on. So, we might want to talk with our fridge in Klingon or something like that. I mean, that's a caricature, of course. But, this could be extremely useful because these things are hard to manage. They're going to be networked. They're going to be talking to each other. So we want to be able to talk to them and interact with them. And, of course, the most natural way of doing that is to use human language, and whatever human language that is. This should not be sort of like a hindrance. So this is really important. Another innovative application might be sort of like large-scale in vivo models, where you've got big machine translation models, people interact with those models, and sort of like feedback from post-edits or changes come back into the model, it's actively retrained, etc. So there's a big scope, and we need to capture those sort of like dimensions of disruptions in our QT21 project. And of course, kind of like, this is linking to big data. Data is the lifeblood for machine translation. Machine translation is actually big data and has been big data for quite a long time, so we need more data and better data for more languages, etc. And we've got some details in the documentation that we've developed. And we're expecting this to have a strong impact, of course, on high quality machine translation, which is often outbound translation, which is of really of big importance to language service providers, the localization industry, human translators, but also gisting, of course. Mobile translation, the personal assistant was mentioned earlier on, multi-party dialogue translation, contextualized text and speech translation in multimodal and multimedia settings. Okay, so that was kind of like, in a nutshell, a very, very high-level outline of the roadmap. So let me turn to the master plan. So this is grounded in the roadmap. It's grounded in a lot of activities that have been going on over the last 3 years, 4 years in terms of MetaNet. And this master plan, importantly, targets two fundamental success criteria. And they're different. Okay, and they're importantly different. And these are translation quality and productivity. And let me explain this a little bit. Earlier on, I had these sort of like levels of key performance impact factors. We talked about disruptive new approaches, new technologies for proven approaches, innovative applications, etc. So let's have a look at the disruptive new approaches. So after some time with these new approaches, we expect to get a really high jump in quality. Okay? And if we get that, if our machine translation gets so much better, then of course that has a very, very strong impact on productivity. The new technologies for proven approaches will not make machine translation maybe that much better. Incrementally we'll get better and better and better. But this can have a steady and really strong impact on productivity. Okay? And finally, the innovative applications, might even sort of like not change the quality very much, but really change our lives. And we need to make sure that we capture those in the master plan. And one reason we need to make sure that we capture them is that some of these are cumulative, they're additive. If we have innovative application and our machine translation gets so much better, that really is a multiplier effect. Okay, so let me conclude this overview presentation by giving you an outline of the project structure that we have in mind at the moment. So our thinking is roughly along the following lines. We would like to concentrate the technology development and the sort of like coordination in terms of a large core project, and then have a number of smaller projects clustered around it. And very importantly, and diverging from some of the funding mechanisms that we've used in the past, we would like to implement an element of competition in the core technology project. And the element of competition is going to be provided in terms of shared data sets that are shared by the groups that are working on the disruptive technologies, on the improved technologies for tried and trusted methods, etc., on these tracks, under the leitmotif. Okay? And they compete on these shared data sets. And it won't be the case that their funding will be removed, but they have to validate their research on these data sets. It's almost like integrating a shared task as a core aspect of this core project, of this core and coordinating project. So technologies will be validated through competition within the shared project. And then these technologies will be handed out towards the associated satellite projects. And these satellite projects concentrate on the RISEs, the research innovation application scenarios that have been worked out going back all the way into MetaNet and with our industry partners and our various planning panels within the QT Launchpad project. And these RISEs, these are application areas, and they at the moment concentrate on corporate, on media, on public, and you can see that, media, there's going to be a lot of dialogue processing, speech-to-speech translation, etc. Public will concentrate strongly on user-generated content. Corporate will concentrate maybe on more sort of like traditional localization, internationalization operations. But of course, these things do not exist in isolation. They inform each other and they feed each other. And I should also mention that the competition in the core technology development coordinating project is also implemented to support sharing of ideas and knowledge within what works best to speed up the gains in machine translation productivity and quality. Okay, and I think I'm basically talked about all these aspects. So we're back to the future. It still is uncertain as it was before we started this talk, but I think we've hopefully hopefully been successful in communicating some of our thinking for the way ahead in machine translation, and would like to use the now remaining only 10 minutes of this slot for open discussion and feedback from the audience on any of the aspects of the presentations that you've seen in the last 50 minutes. Thank you.